This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. In this world of timelessness, we are presenting this morning the episode on capacity. It's a life discussion. It's being brought to you by Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, the voice of Perspectonomics, and co-host Sarah Benton. We're going to let our listeners into one little secret. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Jeremy. Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, and that's really to tell people that we're actually on a beautiful summer's morning, engaged through Zoom and all those other things, having this discussion. And Respectonomics is addressing the issue today of capacity. We've talked about capacity in the past in the sense we talked about the fullness of life. We want to talk about capacity from several points of view today, because when in my travels I go around talking about Respectonomics, one of the comebacks I get is, oh dear, I feel like I'm over capacity. And I have a feeling that you would agree with that, Sarah.
Yes, and it's funny, and I use that phrase quite a bit when I'm working with people and when I'm reaching out and asking for assistance or help or engagement. One of the first things I'll say is, do you have capacity for, right?
It's a very good question. And I'll give you a sort of a very corporate backing on that one. Was back in I think it was in the 1940s, early 1940s, and Jeep was being invented by the Willis Corporation. The US Army thought this was the best thing since sliced bread, and they ordered 600,000 of them. At which point, Willis threw up his hands and said, we can't do that kind of production, and the whole lot went over to Ford. And that's just a sort of, corporate anecdote. In one way, doesn't mean anything, but actually it does. We all find ourselves in life with capacity constraints.
Yeah.
And the first thing you've mentioned is reaching out for help. Now, men, and I'll be very, gender secular about this one, and that is men are shockers for asking for help. We can do it on our own. You are free to comment on that or not, Sarah. Otherwise, we will continue the conversation.
We can continue the conversation. I would say I'm a very independent individual as well.
I know you are. No. But I'm just, men don't read directions. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. Okay. For those of you that cannot see me nodding my head, yes.
Okay. I'm not trying to make this into any spectacular, but really pointing out, we generally speaking are not very good at asking for help. Therefore, one of the first things we have to come to grips with is when we find ourselves in what you would call overcapacity, yes, when you just feel like you're being swamped and so on, one of the keys there is to go and ask for help. And I find a useful way of also backing out of situations. We all know that somebody comes to you and asks you to do something. And you and I know, everybody knows, the quick answer is no. That's the easy one-line word.
That's often in our minds what we're thinking we actually like to articulate or say, but it never comes out as just simple no. It's never a full sentence, is it?
Yeah. Well, partly because it's flattering. And then, of course, it's, you need my help? Well, I'll be the first to help. But isn't that interesting? Here we are saying, I'll be the first to help. And yet we're the ones that are reluctant to ask for help. So there's a certain sort of, not contradiction there, but a dichotomy. So I think the first thing to do is also to understand when people ask for our help, there's one standard answer, which is, thank you for asking me. Let me think about it. And it always amazes me that the answer becomes very clear 1 minute later. You don't have to wait 24 hours. It's usually an answer that builds into itself that you don't want to do it.
Sometimes it's not a matter of want. It could be in alignment with exactly what we're talking about, which is capacity, and we just don't have capacity to do it.
Well, that's what I want to talk about as a one-line comment, because when we are being asked to do something, I think a very helpful comeback is, thank you for inviting me or asking me. I don't have capacity to do that. And it's a line I like to use because it gets away from I'm too busy.
Mhm.
It gets away from you're not important enough
Right.
and all of the horrible innuendos that go with these things. But when we say, I don't have capacity, one of the great advantages of that is, generally speaking, it's true,
Right.
almost by definition, but also it's a statement that reflects, it projects very well on the other person because they, by definition, don't have capacity. Otherwise, they wouldn't have asked you in the first place.
Well, there's a level of understanding or compassion or empathy to
Right.
that comment,
Hmm.
with a feeling also that you need to explain the why. You
Yeah.
don't explain the why.
No, I think that's a very good point. When you say I don't have capacity, you don't have to explain anything. You don't have to say because I'm going to be catching a train at 10 in the morning. You just, I don't have capacity to do that. And it has, as I say, I think it raises the tone of the conversation. And really, more importantly, perhaps, it gets us away from saying yes when we ought to say no.
Hmm,
Because
okay.
the saying yes and then having to back out later creates more problems than, well, we all know that. It's
Yes.
kind of awkward.
Well,
But
think about the stress that you're carrying along the way as well, in terms of knowing that you really can't or don't have the capacity to do it, but you've said yes, and now you're carrying that with you for however long that
yeah,
is, whether end of day or end of week, knowing that you've got this sitting there to do it. Now you've got to figure out how to have dialogue with me. No, I
yeah.
don't want it.
I
So,
don't know about you, Sarah, but I also find something else. Somebody asks me to do something to which I agree, and it's, let's say it's something relatively minor, you know,
mhm,
could you pick up a newspaper? We're in town or something. But the point of the matter is how often that little detail derails all the big details. It's totally disproportionate, but and I can make all kinds of reasons for it, but it really comes back to the importance of being able to say, I don't have capacity in the first place.
and we're simply talking about that situation. There's a myriad of times where, yes, we will be able to,
Yeah,
you know,
of
so we're
course.
just talking about
Mhm.
this. We're not saying it's a
Mm.
standard approach to say no.
Yeah. But
Right.
when we deal with capacity, we are also dealing with potential because there's a difference between what I'm actually doing and what I'm capable of doing. I
Mhm.
want to talk a bit about that because in respectonomics, the one thing we say over and over again is that the dignity of the human being is actually understanding who we are.
Mm.
So, in other words, if I am operating below my potential, that's fine. But here's the catch to my potential. My potential is not yours, and yours is not mine. And one of the cornerstones to the sort of ugliness of life is envy. I
Mm.
am envious of somebody being able to do or have or whatever it is. Envy gets us into more flipping trouble probably than we can shake a stick at.
Yeah.
And the hilarious part about envy is I can envy somebody for their, you know, their Rolls Royce or whatever it is. But you know something? They don't even know I'm envious. They don't even care. I
Right.
mean, it's in
Not
a
even a thought that crosses their mind.
no, it's a passing interest. So it's a total waste of energy to be envious, for one thing, but it also breeds within oneself an idea that I can do something beyond my potential. And when we try and do things beyond our potential, that is exactly when we get into overcapacity or
Right.
beyond our own capacity. So understanding the limits to oneself is healthy. And I think, on the whole, very refreshing. I think most of us, if there were 100 people in a room and we all put up our hands and said, I'm not very good at ballet or whatever, I think most people would go, oh, thank goodness, you're the same as I am, which is
Right.
another way of saying we're all the same.
Right.
So cut out the envy, stop worrying about other people's potential. But if we're going to look at our own potential, we also need to look at what are the things that are inhibiting our performance. Because if our potential is operating below capacity, then it makes complete sense to dignify my very being, my history, my upbringing, my education, and all the things that I have in life. Then I owe that potential the dignity of giving it a shot. But in doing that, I also have to look at what are the things that are inhibiting me, that are holding me back. Generally speaking, we've talked about this in previous episodes. Generally speaking, the inhibitors are fear of rejection, fear of success, fear of failure, fear of looking foolish, and a thing called situational shyness. Situational shyness is the one that amazes me. It's the one that says I can do it under one set of circumstances, but not in another. So I can't pick up the telephone and have an unsolicited phone call, but I can go into a cocktail party, go straight up to somebody and introduce myself.
Right.
They're exactly the same activities, but they're different settings. I can do it in one, but not the other. And we could talk endlessly. I would never talk endlessly, would I? Ever. Why are you rolling your eyes? What's going on here? The audience can't see it. But we do have potential. We do have inhibitors. And taking a look at your inhibitions and the things that are holding you back is kind of useful.
Well,
And I
capacity
don't,
with those inhibitors.
yes. But I think, Sarah, the thing is you're not trying to turn yourself into some sort of, guided missile. It can happen, but it is also to make sure that the fuel that you've got is being used wisely and effectively. I think that's reasonable. The next thing we want to talk about is what I call a living schedule. One of the things we get into the habit of, this is all part of the Compass Point series, because the Compass Point series, I think we have the living compass, which is the one that takes us from mind, body, and soul and how we can get them to integrate. Then we have the living schedule, which is the one I'm going to be talking about now. And the living schedule says this: everybody's got 10 jobs to do in the day. Have you got 15 or 20?
Somewhere around that mark.
Yeah, okay. And we write these wonderful shopping lists of all the things we're going to do. We do it the night before and we put them in nice little gold binders and might do it in Word. We might do it on our iPhones, but we get those lists ready to go. And the common answer is, oh, it's so satisfying to stroke one off. Well, one of the truths is, I don't know about you, Sarah, but there are very, very few jobs that I can say are 100% complete.
Correct.
I
So you
just,
get that mark.
yeah, you got to sort of send a tick mark with a line through it, and then you get into your own little hieroglyphics of how you reflect that. But I think a much better way to do it is this: take your 10 jobs you want to get done today.
Mhm.
And under the living schedule, we have a document that will help people to do this. And it will be up on the website so people can, what's the word? Copy it, take it down, download it. That's a very modern word. Downloading. Mm-hmm. Yes, all right. I'm getting there. But the truth
Well,
then,
the episode, downloading, uploading
wow, there's another one.
for the mind, body, and soul.
Yeah,
Anyway, yeah.
okay. No, but the thing is, Sarah, what we want to do is take those 10 activities you want to do today, like this podcast, for example, and we've allowed ourselves an hour and a half to do it. So what you do is you say podcast 9 till 10:30, and you give yourself by definition, an hour and a half to do it. And you go through the day giving yourself time to do these things. And invariably what you find is that the activity actually takes up less time than you've scheduled yourself for, allocated yourself for.
For time
That,
blocking. Yes.
yeah, but that in itself is very satisfying,
Yes.
because now we've allowed ourselves an hour and a half. In actual fact, we did it in an hour. So I've got half an hour to spare. I am now free, and this is very important. I'm very free now to use that half hour however I want. That's my
So
gift
giving
to
yourself
me.
time back.
That's my gift to me. And that is how we start derailing this overcapacity, by giving ourselves the time that we're going to make available for a job. Sometimes it'll go the other way. And that's not necessarily unsatisfying. It just proves a very straightforward point. Gosh, I needed more time for that. But by looking at it through the time filter, the way we've discussed it, rather than a series of 25 jobs that have to be done today, is far more realistic. And it's also more likely to be repeated, meaning I'll do it again tomorrow. If you have a list, have you done this one? You do a list of 25 things, you get 3 things done. That list stays as 25 things for the next 2 weeks. You never change it.
Yes.
Well, that's just depressing and not very effective. So
Right.
that's the reason for the living schedule. Half an hour to do this, an hour to do this, an hour to do that, whatever it would be. That's how we think the schedule should be working. The thing that I also want to talk about here is the concept of rest. I've hinted at it already, but one of them, I think, one of the plagues in North America today, and probably global, what am I saying? One of the plagues today is lack of rest.
Yes.
And rest comes in two ways, really. There's sleeping, which of course is made up of good sleep and bad sleep. We all know that time when you've slept for 8 hours and you don't feel like you slept at all.
Right.
Because I don't know what the technical description of it all is, but it's been bad sleep. And the other thing is when we want to relax and rest, we quite often do things that actually aren't very relaxing. So,
Mm.
for example, the classic is you go on this wonderful holiday to Costa Rica and you have a blast. Coming back, the flights go wrong and you get delayed in New York and then you get whatever, whatever. You get all these things happening. What is it that you remember when you land back home? The
First trip.
flight.
Adventure home.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes away a lot of the pleasure. So what's important is to be able to relax and rest in a manner that when it's finished, it actually gives you the feeling you really have done it.
Mm.
And there are two ways of doing that. One you've heard me say this a zillion times is literally the activity of writing. Handwriting, not typing and not
Right.
digitalizing or whatever, but just literally taking pen to paper and writing. You can write poetry, you can write a journal for the day, you can write a, a, a story if you want. If you like doing children's stories, you can do that. But whatever it is, writing is a wonderful therapy. And it just brings us all down. And when it's finished, when it's you sort of sign off and say, hey, done my writing for the day, you always have this feeling of elation. You know
Mm.
that thing when you write a thank you letter? That was a lovely dinner. Thank you so much for having me. So enjoyed meeting the family, blah, 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 blah. You put it in the envelope. What is that feeling you have when you've done that? It's always one of elation. It's one of rejuvenation. It's
Right.
it's almost a paradox to say it's a restful activity that rejuvenates and gets us more stimulated. So rest is very important. And the other one that I think you know this from your world of aerobics and yoga and so on, but the world of relaxing your body is a very powerful technique.
Yeah.
When you literally allow your body to relax your toes, you relax your knees, you relax your femur, you relax all parts of your body. And do you know the one part that's fascinating to relax?
What's that?
Your face. I know. It's a fascinating exercise. Most people never even think of it. But
You don't realize until you're almost being scripted where somebody's saying, "Relax your jaw, relax your
that's it.
tongue, relax your
Yeah.
shoulders,"
Yeah.
like everything, right?
Yeah. And you go through your body, literally all, relax your eyes, relax your nose, relax your ears, relax your temples. It's an amazing exercise. And that in itself is restful. So when we feel that we're over the capacity, then that's the important thing to do is to start looking at. I mean, I can say some to me, incredibly obvious things. Oh, you've got to take some things off your to-do list.
Right.
We've talked a little about that. I don't think any of these are what I call necessarily functional. I think it is functional, though, to get some rest time.
Right.
Now, the last thing I'd like to sort of address, and this, you've got some thoughts on this as well, sir. I would like to talk about really, yeah, two things. One is when you're over capacity, you know how strained you feel? And you
Yeah.
feel, yeah, I mean, nothing sort of seems to work. And if you talk to anybody who's an Olympic athlete, they'll tell you the worst thing of all is not to feel relaxed. If you're all bound up, you're going to trip and fall and all kinds of things. So we've already talked a bit about relaxation. But one of the things is when we get to that point of what I call overcapacity,
Mhm.
one of the techniques is quite literally to start saying to people, I am going to increase my capacity.
Mm.
Now, there are two reasons for doing
How
that.
do you increase your
Ah, increasing your capacity comes from doing two things. One is quite literally starting a habit of thanking people. When you get into the habit of thanking people and saying, hey, thank you, Sarah, for being with us this morning. Thank you to your mother for looking after things so that we can have the time together. Thank you to my wife, Kathy, for making sure that office is so quiet. When we start thinking gratefully, it is extraordinary how the capacity to take on issues and maybe other activities increases almost logically.
I think it changes your perspective as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that may be the point. Yeah. I mean, I think there's also some, what do they call it now? Psycho something, something, something channels that expand when we exhibit gratitude. But exhibiting gratitude in and of itself takes away complacency. It gives us an awareness and it gives us the dignity of the other person.
Mhm.
I can't think of a better thing. Now, here's the final point. If we agree that the thank yous and the smiles and the dignity and so on are the very things that increase our capacity. Agreed?
I think they're contributory factors, yes.
Yeah. Okay. But here's a one liner that absolutely turns on everybody. And that is when somebody says to you, your business is real estate, mine is respectonomics. When people say to us, how's your business going?
Mhm,
We are continuing to grow our business.
mhm.
We are continuing to grow our business. I said it twice because it is one of the most powerful tools available to us. Everybody loves to hear that. They
Right.
love to know that it's growing. We are by nature. We think of prosperity. We think in terms of hope. We're talking about things that are getting bigger and better. So when you say to somebody, we're continuing to grow our business, you create a symbiosis that people just relish and they love to hear it. So you'll grow your capacity. It is totally fair to say we're growing our business. The two go hand in hand by definition.
Excellent.
So I'm going to say I rest my case, but I'm going to do it with one little add on today. I rest my case, but we are continuing to grow our business.
Absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thank you, Sarah.
Take care.
Bye.